Sarah Martinez and Jessica Chen had built the perfect life together in their luxury suburban mansion, complete with matching wedding rings, a successful interior design business, and dreams of starting a family. But on a scorching July afternoon in 2024, their carefully constructed world would shatter when they made a decision that would transform them from respected businesswomen into cold-blooded killers. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because the stories we uncover will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the people living right next door. Now, let's go back to where it all began. The exclusive Maple Ridge neighborhood of Westfield, Connecticut, had always been the kind of place where secrets stayed buried beneath perfectly manicured lawns and behind closed curtains of million-dollar homes. Sarah Martinez, 34, and Jessica Chen, 31, had moved into their sprawling colonial estate 3 years earlier, becoming the first openly lesbian couple in the conservative community. Their arrival had initially caused whispered conversations at country club gatherings and sideways glances at charity events, but their undeniable success in the competitive world of high-end interior design had gradually earned them grudging respect from their wealthy neighbors. Sarah, with her striking auburn hair and commanding presence, had built her reputation transforming the homes of Connecticut's elite. Her portfolio included governor's mansions, celebrity retreats, and corporate headquarters that had been featured in Architectural Digest and Town and Country magazine. She possessed an almost supernatural ability to walk into any space and envision its potential, seeing past outdated fixtures and questionable color choices to create environments that made her clients feel like they were living inside a magazine spread. Jessica complemented Sarah's bold vision with meticulous attention to detail and an innate understanding of what made spaces feel warm and inviting rather than merely expensive. Born in San Francisco to immigrant parents who had sacrificed everything for their daughter's education, Jessica approached every project with the precision of a surgeon and the heart of an artist. Her specialty was creating intimate gathering spaces that encouraged conversation and connection, something that had made their firm, Martinez Chen Interiors, the most sought-after design house in New England. Their personal relationship had been a whirlwind romance that began 4 years earlier at a design conference in Manhattan. Sarah had been presenting her latest residential project to a room full of industry professionals when Jessica, sitting in the third row, raised her hand with a question about sustainable materials that had sparked a heated debate lasting well into the evening. That debate had continued over drinks, then dinner, then coffee the next morning, and within 6 months, Jessica had moved from San Francisco to Connecticut to join both Sarah's business and her life. The Maple Ridge house had been their dream project, a 1920s colonial that they had gutted and rebuilt from the inside out. Every room told the story of their partnership, from the chef's kitchen, where Jessica experimented with fusion recipes that combined her Chinese heritage with Sarah's Mexican roots, to the home office where they worked side by side on client presentations late into the night. The master bedroom, with its soaring ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking their private garden, had been featured in 3 different design magazines as an example of how traditional architecture could be reimagined for modern living. But it was the backyard that had become their true sanctuary. The Olympic-sized swimming pool, surrounded by imported Italian marble and landscaping that created the illusion of a private resort, had cost more than most people's houses. Jessica had insisted on the infinity edge that seemed to blend seamlessly with the horizon, while Sarah had designed the outdoor kitchen and entertainment area that could accommodate 50 guests for their legendary summer parties. The space had become the backdrop for magazine photo shoots, charity fundraisers, and intimate gatherings with their closest friends and most important clients. Their success, however, came with pressures that few people understood. The design world was notoriously competitive, with clients who changed their minds daily and expected miracles on impossible timelines. Sarah had developed a reputation for perfectionism that bordered on obsession, often redoing entire rooms if a single element didn't meet her exacting standards. Jessica bore the brunt of managing difficult clients and impossible budgets, working 18-hour days to ensure that every project exceeded expectations while staying profitable. The strain had begun to show in their relationship during the spring of 2024. Arguments that had once been rare became weekly occurrences, usually centered around work, but touching on deeper issues of control, commitment, and their future together. Sarah wanted to expand the business nationally, potentially opening offices in Los Angeles and Miami, while Jessica preferred to focus on their Connecticut clientele and start thinking about having children. They had been through 3 rounds of IVF treatments, each failure taking an emotional toll that neither woman knew how to process. "We're becoming the kind of couple we used to make fun of," Jessica had said during one particularly heated argument in May. "All work and no joy. When was the last time we just enjoyed being together without talking about clients or contracts or expansion plans?" Sarah's response had been typically pragmatic. "Success requires sacrifice, Jess. We can't have everything we want exactly when we want it. The business needs our full attention right now. We can think about personal stuff later." But Jessica was tired of waiting for later. At 31, she felt like her biological clock was ticking loudly enough for the entire neighborhood to hear. She had watched her younger sister in California welcome 2 children, while Jessica threw herself into work, creating beautiful spaces for other people's families while her own remained perpetually on hold. The latest IVF failure in June had left her feeling empty and desperate for something, anything, that would make her feel alive again. It was against this backdrop of professional success and personal frustration that 17-year-old Tyler Brooks entered their lives in early July 2024. Tyler had started his pool maintenance business the previous summer, using his father's old truck and equipment to service homes in the wealthier neighborhoods around Westfield. What had begun as a way to earn college money had evolved into a surprisingly profitable enterprise that allowed him to work independently while maintaining the flexible schedule that his high school soccer commitments required. Tyler was everything that Sarah and Jessica's sophisticated world was not. Where their lives were carefully curated and constantly documented for social media and professional publications, Tyler represented authentic simplicity. He showed up each Tuesday and Friday at exactly 2 o'clock, wearing the same faded swim trunks and tank top, carrying his testing kit and cleaning supplies with the easy confidence of someone who genuinely enjoyed his work. Standing just over 6 feet tall, with sun-bleached hair and the kind of tan that could only come from spending entire days outdoors, Tyler had the natural athleticism of someone who had never set foot in a gym but stayed in perfect shape through constant physical activity. His smile was genuine and unguarded, lacking the calculated charm that Sarah and Jessica had grown accustomed to in their professional circles. He spoke with the slight drawl of someone who had grown up in rural Connecticut, his conversation peppered with observations about weather patterns, water chemistry, and the changing seasons that revealed a connection to the natural world that both women had lost somewhere along their climb to success. During his first few visits, Tyler had been purely professional, testing chemical levels, skimming debris, and maintaining the complex filtration system that kept their pool crystal clear. But as the summer progressed and the heat waves became more intense, both Sarah and Jessica found themselves timing their schedules to be home during his visits. Initially, they told themselves it was about being responsible homeowners, making sure their expensive equipment was being properly maintained. Jessica was the first to admit the real reason. "There's something about watching him work that's almost meditative," she confessed to Sarah after a particularly stressful day dealing with a client who had changed their mind about a kitchen renovation for the 4th time. "He's so focused and present. I can't remember the last time I felt that connected to what I was doing." Sarah had noticed it too, though she approached her attraction with her typical analytical mindset. "He represents everything we've moved away from," she said. "Simplicity, physical work, being connected to immediate results rather than endless planning and politics. I think we're attracted to what we've lost, not necessarily to him specifically." But Jessica wasn't interested in psychological analysis. She was interested in the way Tyler's presence made her feel less anxious about their failed IVF attempts and uncertain future. When he was working in their backyard, the world seemed quieter, more manageable, less overwhelming. She began offering him cold drinks and snacks, extending their brief conversations about pool maintenance into longer discussions about his soccer season, his college plans, and his surprisingly thoughtful observations about the families he worked for around the neighborhood. Tyler, for his part, was flattered by the attention from 2 successful, attractive women who treated him as more than just hired help. Most of his clients barely acknowledged his existence, leaving checks on outdoor tables and communicating through brief text messages about scheduling changes. Sarah and Jessica asked about his life, remembered details from previous conversations, and seemed genuinely interested in his opinions about things that had nothing to do with pool maintenance. The shift from professional to personal began gradually in mid-July when a heat wave settled over Connecticut, pushing temperatures into the upper 90s for 6 consecutive days. Tyler had arrived for his regular Tuesday appointment to find both women floating in the pool, seeking relief from the oppressive heat that had made their air-conditioned house feel stuffy and confining. "Don't mind us," Sarah had called out from her spot near the infinity edge. "We're basically living in the pool until this heat breaks. Do whatever you need to do." But instead of his usual routine, Tyler had found himself drawn into conversation about the unusual weather patterns, sharing his observations about how the extreme heat was affecting water chemistry across all his clients' pools. Jessica had invited him to join them in the water while he waited for the filtration system to complete its cycle, an invitation that had seemed perfectly innocent in the moment. The afternoon had stretched into evening, with Sarah suggesting they order dinner rather than forcing Tyler to drive home in rush-hour traffic during dangerous heat conditions. The conversation had flowed as smoothly as the wine they had opened, touching on everything from Tyler's plans to study environmental science in college, to Sarah and Jessica's dreams of someday having a retreat property where they could disconnect from the demands of their business. "You two have everything figured out," Tyler had said as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Successful business, beautiful home, perfect relationship. I hope I can build something like this someday." Sarah and Jessica had exchanged a look that Tyler didn't understand, a moment of silent communication that spoke to the gap between public perception and private reality. From the outside, their life did look perfect, but sitting by the pool in the growing darkness, both women were acutely aware of what their perfect life was missing, and how Tyler's presence had temporarily filled some indefinable void they hadn't even realized existed. That evening marked the beginning of a dangerous shift in their relationship with Tyler, though none of them recognized the warning signs at the time. What had started as harmless attraction and the innocent pleasure of mentoring a young person would gradually evolve into something far more complex and ultimately deadly, as the boundaries between appropriate and inappropriate, professional and personal, legal and criminal became increasingly blurred in the suffocating heat of that Connecticut summer. The second week of July brought no relief from the oppressive heat that had settled over Westfield like a suffocating blanket. Inside their climate-controlled offices at Martinez and Interiors, Sarah and Jessica attempted to maintain their professional routines, but both women found their thoughts drifting to Tuesday afternoons and the easy comfort of Tyler's presence by their pool. "We need to talk about what's happening," Jessica said during their Monday evening planning session, her voice barely above a whisper despite being alone in their home office. "I can't stop thinking about him, and I don't think it's healthy." Sarah looked up from her laptop, where she had been reviewing fabric samples for a client project, though the screen had remained unchanged for the past 20 minutes. "He's 17, Jess. 17. We're successful businesswomen in our 30s. This is insane." "I know it's insane," Jessica replied, moving to the window that overlooked their pool area. "But when was the last time either of us felt excited about anything that wasn't work-related? When was the last time we looked forward to something that didn't involve clients or contracts or fertility appointments?" The question hung in the air between them, highlighting the emotional void that had been growing larger with each failed IVF attempt and each 18-hour workday. Their relationship had become a carefully choreographed performance of success and stability, but underneath the polished exterior, both women were drowning in dissatisfaction they couldn't articulate. Tuesday arrived with temperatures climbing toward triple digits before noon. Tyler appeared at their pool at exactly 2 o'clock, but instead of his usual confident efficiency, he seemed distracted, checking his phone repeatedly and glancing toward the house with obvious nervousness. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked, emerging from the kitchen with a pitcher of iced tea she had prepared specifically for his arrival. "My truck's air conditioning died on the way here," Tyler said, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "I've got 3 more stops after this, and honestly, I'm not sure I can handle this heat much longer." Jessica appeared beside Sarah, having abandoned a client call the moment she heard Tyler's voice in the backyard. "You should cool off first. The pool's perfect temperature, and we're not going anywhere in this heat anyway." What followed was a repeat of the previous week's pattern, but with an undercurrent of intention that none of them could ignore. Tyler joined them in the pool, but this time the conversation was more personal, more intimate. Jessica asked about his girlfriend, learning he had recently broken up with his high school sweetheart before college. Sarah shared details about the stress of running their business that she rarely discussed, even with close friends. "Sometimes I feel like we're living someone else's life," Sarah admitted as they floated in the shallow end. "We have everything we thought we wanted, but it doesn't feel like enough anymore." Tyler, floating between them, observed both women with the unguarded curiosity of someone too young to understand the complexity of adult relationships. "Maybe you just need to try something different. Something that reminds you why you fell in love with each other in the first place." The innocent suggestion carried weight that Tyler couldn't possibly comprehend. As the afternoon stretched into evening, both women found themselves studying his easy confidence, his unself-conscious physicality, his complete lack of the emotional baggage that had accumulated in their own relationship over years of professional pressure and personal disappointment. When Jessica suggested they order dinner again, Tyler accepted without hesitation. When Sarah opened a second bottle of wine, he didn't refuse the glass she offered. When the conversation turned to relationships and experiences, none of them acknowledged the dangerous territory they were entering. "I've never been with anyone older," Tyler said as they sat around their outdoor dining table, citronella candles flickering in the humid evening air. "All the girls at school seem so dramatic about everything. You two have this calm confidence that's really attractive." The compliment sent electricity through both women, though they exchanged a look of shared concern. They were approaching a line that, once crossed, would change everything. "Tyler," Jessica said carefully, "you should probably know that what you're feeling, what we're all feeling, it's complicated. We're not just older. We're married. And there are legal considerations that could affect your future if anyone misunderstood our friendship." But Tyler's response revealed a maturity that surprised them both. "I understand the complications, but sometimes the most important experiences come with risks. I graduate in 10 months, and then I'm leaving for college. This summer feels like the last chance to experience something real before everything changes." As the evening deepened and the wine took effect, the boundaries between appropriate and inappropriate became increasingly blurred. Tyler helped clear dishes, his hand brushing against Jessica's as they moved around the outdoor kitchen. Sarah found herself studying his profile as he talked about his environmental science major, wondering what it would be like to feel that passionate about the future again. When Tyler finally left at nearly midnight, both women stood in their kitchen, aware that they had crossed into territory that could destroy everything they had built together. "We can't let this happen," Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I know," Jessica replied, already planning what she would wear for Tyler's next visit. "We absolutely cannot let this happen." But even as they spoke the words, both women knew they were already too far down a path that would lead them to make choices they never imagined possible, choices that would transform them from respected community members into something far more dangerous. The Friday appointment arrived like an inevitable collision neither woman could prevent. Sarah had spent the morning pacing their home office, alternately convincing herself to fire Tyler immediately, and then finding reasons why such a drastic action would be impossible to explain to their neighbors. Jessica had canceled 2 client meetings, claiming a migraine that wasn't entirely fabricated, spending hours selecting and rejecting outfits before settling on a sundress that was casual enough to seem accidental, but flattering enough to feel intentional. Tyler arrived at exactly 2 o'clock, but something had changed in his demeanor since Tuesday. Gone was the nervous uncertainty, replaced by a confidence that suggested he had made his own decision about where their relationship was heading. He moved through his pool maintenance routine with deliberate efficiency, his movements more fluid and purposeful than before. "How long do you need to finish?" Sarah asked from the kitchen doorway, her voice carrying an undertone that made the question about more than pool chemicals. "About 20 minutes for the technical stuff," Tyler replied, not looking up from his testing kit. "But I was hoping we could talk afterward. About Tuesday night. About where this is going." The directness of his response caught both women off guard. They had been preparing to dance around the subject with adult sophistication and careful boundaries, but Tyler's straightforward approach stripped away their ability to pretend confusion about their mutual attraction. Jessica emerged from the house, carrying a tray of sandwiches and drinks, playing the role of gracious hostess while her heart hammered against her ribs. "I thought you might be hungry. It's going to be another long, hot day." As Tyler finished his work, the conversation took on the surreal quality of three people discussing something monumental while pretending to focus on mundane topics. They talked about the weather, his college preparations, their upcoming design projects, but underneath every exchange was the unspoken acknowledgement that they were negotiating the terms of crossing a line that would change all their lives forever. "My parents are at their lake house until Sunday," Tyler said as they sat around the outdoor table, the words hanging in the air like a challenge. "And my next appointment canceled because of the heat, so I have the whole afternoon free." Sarah felt her professional instincts screaming warnings about liability, reputation, legal consequences, and the destruction of everything she had worked to build. But those rational concerns were increasingly overwhelmed by a hunger she hadn't felt in years, a desperate need to feel alive and desired and spontaneous in ways their carefully controlled life had eliminated. "Tyler," she began, intending to explain why nothing could happen between them. "I know this is complicated," he interrupted, his voice steady despite his youth. "I know you're worried about age and legality and your reputation. But I'm 17, not 14. In 4 months, I'll be 18. And I've never wanted anything more than I want to be with both of you right now." The confession hung between them as the afternoon heat shimmered off the pool surface. Jessica reached across the table and took Sarah's hand, a gesture that had once been automatic but now felt loaded with significance. "If we do this," Jessica said quietly, "everything changes. Our relationship, our business, our standing in the community. Are you prepared for those consequences?" Tyler's response revealed a maturity that made their age concerns feel less relevant. "The only consequence I'm worried about is spending the rest of my life wondering what it would have been like. You two have taught me more about passion and sophistication in a few weeks than I learned in 17 years. I don't want to walk away from that." What followed was an afternoon that would be seared into all their memories with perfect clarity. The transition from conversation to physical intimacy happened gradually, each boundary crossed with deliberate intention rather than impulsive passion. Sarah, with her need for control, orchestrated the experience with the same attention to detail she brought to her design projects. Jessica, hungry for emotional connection, provided the tenderness that transformed what could have been merely physical into something far more dangerous. For Tyler, the experience exceeded every fantasy he had harbored since their first extended conversation by the pool. These weren't the fumbling experimentations of high school relationships, but the confident ministrations of women who understood their own desires and weren't afraid to communicate them clearly. As evening approached, and they lay by the pool in the golden hour light that photographers prize above all others, the magnitude of what they had done began to settle over them. Sarah's analytical mind was already calculating risks and consequences, while Jessica felt a satisfaction that had been absent from her life for months. "This can't be a one-time thing," Tyler said, his arm draped possessively around Jessica's waist while his other hand rested on Sarah's hip. "I meant what I said about not wanting to spend my life wondering. I want to explore this with you. Both of you." The statement should have triggered immediate panic about the impossibility of maintaining such a relationship. Instead, both women felt a thrill of possibility that terrified them with its intensity. "We need rules," Sarah said, her professional instincts asserting themselves even in this most unprofessional situation. "Boundaries, absolute discretion, and we need to be clear about what this is and isn't." But even as she spoke about rules and boundaries, Sarah knew they had already crossed the most important line. What had begun as harmless attraction had evolved into something that would consume all their thoughts and reshape all their priorities. As Tyler prepared to leave that evening, he moved with the confidence of someone who knew he would be returning soon. The dynamic between the three of them had shifted permanently, with power flowing in directions that defied their respective ages and life experiences. "Same time Tuesday?" he asked, the question carrying implications that extended far beyond pool maintenance. "Yes," Jessica replied without hesitation, her answer sealing their fate. After Tyler's truck disappeared down their tree-lined street, Sarah and Jessica stood in their kitchen, no longer able to pretend they were the same people they had been that morning. "We're going to do this, aren't we?" Sarah said, the question rhetorical. "We're already doing it," Jessica replied, and both women felt the truth of that statement settle over them like a shadow that would soon engulf everything they thought they knew about themselves and each other. 3 weeks into August, their carefully constructed secret had transformed into an obsession that consumed every aspect of Sarah and Jessica's lives. What had begun as twice-weekly encounters had evolved into daily text messages, carefully orchestrated meetings, and a level of emotional investment that none of them had anticipated. Tyler had become the focal point around which their entire world revolved. Client meetings were scheduled around his availability. Business decisions were delayed so they could spend afternoons by the pool. The successful partnership that had built Martinez and Interiors was cracking under the weight of their shared fixation. "We're losing perspective," Sarah said during one of their increasingly rare moments alone together. "Yesterday, I turned down the Morrison project because it would require evening meetings during Tyler's free time. That's a 6-figure contract, Jess." But Jessica was beyond caring about contracts or professional reputation. The failed IVF treatments and years of emotional disappointment had left her desperate for the validation that Tyler provided. His youthful adoration and genuine desire for her company had filled a void she hadn't realized existed. "Maybe some things are more important than money," Jessica replied, a statement that would have been unthinkable from her just months earlier. When was the last time either of us felt this happy? The happiness, however, was becoming increasingly complicated by Tyler's growing emotional demands. What had started as physical attraction was evolving into something deeper and more possessive. He began questioning their other activities, expressing jealousy about their client relationships, and making suggestions about their future that revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of their situation. "After I graduate, I could defer college for a year," he said during their Tuesday afternoon together in mid-August. "We could travel together. See what this relationship could become without all the secrecy and scheduling." The suggestion sent alarm bells through Sarah's analytical mind, but Jessica's response was more concerning. Instead of immediately explaining why such a plan was impossible, she had seemed to consider it seriously. "Tyler, you're 17, Sarah said carefully. "College is your future. We're a summer experience, not a life plan." But Tyler's expression darkened in a way they hadn't seen before, revealing a side of his personality that was less charming and more controlling than they had realized. "Don't talk to me like I'm a child," he snapped, his voice carrying an edge that made both women suddenly aware of his physical size and strength. "I know exactly what I want, and what I want is you. Both of you." The shift in his demeanor was subtle but unmistakable. Gone was the easygoing teenager who had deferred to their experience and wisdom. In his place was someone who felt entitled to their attention and resentful of any suggestion that their relationship had natural limitations. The warning signs became more apparent over the following days. Tyler began arriving unannounced, claiming he was in the neighborhood, while clearly checking on their activities. He questioned Jessica about a client lunch that ran late, and expressed displeasure when Sarah mentioned a weekend trip they had planned without him. "I thought we were past the point of keeping secrets from each other," he said when Sarah mentioned the trip, his tone suggesting hurt feelings that barely masked deeper anger. The situation reached a crisis point during the final week of August when Tyler discovered that Sarah and Jessica had been discussing ending their relationship with him before he left for college. He had arrived early for their Friday appointment and overheard part of conversation in which Sarah was explaining the legal and professional risks they were taking. "So, I'm just a summer fling to you?" He confronted them, his voice loud enough to carry across their backyard. "Something to experiment with, and then discard when it becomes inconvenient." Jessica tried to explain the complexities of their situation, but Tyler's her had transformed into something uglier. He accused them of using him, of never taking his feelings seriously, of treating him like hired help they could dismiss at will. "You think because you're older and successful that you can just play with people's emotions?" he shouted, his composure completely shattered. "I thought what we had was real. I thought you cared about me." The argument escalated quickly, with Tyler becoming increasingly aggressive, and both women realizing they had fundamentally misjudged his emotional maturity. What they had seen as confident sophistication was actually narcissistic entitlement, and what they had interpreted as mature understanding was manipulation designed to get what he wanted. "Tyler, you need to leave," Sarah said firmly, her professional instincts finally overriding her personal desires. We can discuss this when everyone's calmer. But Tyler's response revealed the depth of his sense of ownership over them. I'm not going anywhere until we figure this out. You don't get to just end this because it's convenient for you. The confrontation continued as evening approached, with Tyler alternating between pleading declarations of love and angry accusations of manipulation. Both women began to realize that what they had seen as a controllable situation had actually become something far more dangerous. When Tyler finally left that night, it was with threats rather than promises. He would not be ignored or dismissed. He would not allow them to move on as if nothing had happened. And if they thought they could go back to their perfect life without consequences, they were about to discover how wrong they could be. As Sarah and Jessica locked their doors and set their security system that night, both women understood that their summer of reckless passion was about to exact a price neither of them was prepared to pay. The Labor Day weekend that was supposed to mark the end of their dangerous summer liaison instead became the beginning of their worst nightmare. Tyler had been calling and texting obsessively since their confrontation, his messages alternating between desperate pleas for reconciliation and increasingly dark threats about what he would do if they continued to ignore him. He's been parked across the street for 3 hours, Jessica whispered from behind their living room curtains on Saturday morning. Just sitting in his truck, watching the house. Sarah joined her at the window, observing Tyler's vehicle positioned strategically where he could monitor their front door and driveway. His presence had transformed their sanctuary into a prison, making them afraid to leave for even basic errands. We should call the police, Sarah said, but both women knew the complications such a call would create. How could they explain Tyler's obsession without revealing the relationship that had created it? Their professional reputations and business would be destroyed by the scandal. The weekend stretched endlessly, with Tyler maintaining his surveillance while sending increasingly unhinged messages. He accused them of ruining his life, of destroying his ability to trust women, of taking away the only real love he had ever experienced. The romantic teenager who had charmed them by their pool had been revealed as something far more dangerous. I know you're reading these messages, one text read. You can't hide from me forever. What we had was real, and I won't let you pretend it wasn't. By Sunday evening, both women were exhausted from the stress of being essentially under siege in their own home. Jessica had developed a tremor in her hands that made it difficult to hold her coffee cup, while Sarah found herself jumping at every sound from outside. This has to end, Sarah said as they watched Tyler's truck pull away after dark, finally giving them a brief respite. Tomorrow I'm calling his parents. This is beyond anything we can handle ourselves. But Tyler had apparently anticipated their desperation. His final message arrived at midnight. If you try to involve my parents or anyone else, I'll tell everyone about our relationship. Photos, videos, text messages, your business, your reputation, your marriage. I'll destroy all of it. Meet me tomorrow at 8 p.m. Your pool. We settle this face to face. The message included a photo attachment that made both women's blood run cold. Tyler had apparently been documenting their encounters, and the image showed enough detail to destroy their lives if it became public. He's been planning this, Jessica said, her voice hollow with realization. The whole time, he's been collecting evidence. We were never in control. He was. Monday evening arrived with unseasonable coolness, the first hint that summer was ending, and with it the illusion that their actions existed in some consequence-free bubble. Sarah and Jessica waited by their pool, both women understanding that their lives were about to change irrevocably. Tyler arrived exactly at 8, but he was no longer the charming teenager who had once seemed so harmless. His expression was cold, calculating, and utterly without the warmth that had initially attracted them. He carried a backpack that both women instinctively knew contained more evidence of their relationship. I'm glad you decided to be reasonable, he said, settling into a chair across from them with the confidence of someone who held all the power. I was starting to think you didn't understand how serious I am about not being discarded. What do you want, Tyler? Sarah asked, her voice steady despite her internal terror. I want what I've always wanted. You. Both of you. And I want the respect of being treated like an equal partner in this relationship instead of some dirty secret you're ashamed of. The demands that followed revealed the extent of Tyler's delusions. He wanted them to break up with each other and each begin separate relationships with him. He wanted financial support for college and beyond. He wanted their promise that they would be available to him whenever he wanted them for as long as he wanted them. And if we refuse? Jessica asked, though she already knew the answer. Tyler smiled with genuine pleasure. Then everyone finds out what Westfield's most respected lesbian couple really does in their spare time. Your clients, your neighbors, the media. I've got enough evidence to destroy your lives completely. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with Tyler outlining his expectations, while both women realized they were trapped in a situation with no acceptable outcome. They could submit to his demands and become essentially his property, or they could refuse and watch their lives be destroyed by scandal. But as Tyler became more specific about his plans, describing in detail how he would control their schedules, their business decisions, and their personal lives, something shifted in Sarah's expression. The same analytical mind that had built their business success was now calculating different options. "You're right," she said suddenly, surprising both Tyler and Jessica. "We haven't been treating you fairly. You deserve better than being hidden like some shameful secret." Tyler's suspicion was immediately aroused by Sarah's apparent capitulation, but his arrogance made him believe he had finally broken their resistance. "I knew you'd see reason eventually," he said, relaxing slightly. "You're both too smart to throw away everything you've built for the sake of false pride." What Tyler didn't realize was that Sarah had identified the one element of their situation that he couldn't control, the physical evidence he was carrying. As long as those photos and videos existed, they would never be free of his manipulation. But if something happened to Tyler himself, the thought was monstrous, unthinkable for someone who had never committed so much as a traffic violation. But as Tyler continued outlining his plans for their future servitude, Sarah found herself studying the heavy crystal ashtray on their outdoor table, calculating distances and angles with the same precision she brought to furniture placement. Jessica, watching Sarah's face, recognized the expression from their most challenging design projects. It was the look Sarah got when she had identified a problem that required an extreme solution. When Tyler stood to retrieve something from his backpack, turning his back to them in a moment of casual confidence, Sarah moved with the decisive action that had made her successful in business. The crystal ashtray connected with the back of his skull with a sound that both women would hear in their nightmares for years to come. Tyler collapsed instantly, his body crumpling beside their pool with the same sudden finality as their old lives. In the space of a single moment, they had transformed from successful businesswomen into killers, their summer of reckless passion culminating in an act of violence that neither had planned but both had somehow known was inevitable. As they stared at Tyler's motionless form, both women understood that they had crossed the final line. Their beautiful home, their successful business, their carefully constructed life together, all of it was now built on a foundation of murder. The cleanup took the rest of the night, two intelligent women applying their considerable organizational skills to the disposal of evidence and the creation of alibis. By morning, Tyler Brooks had simply disappeared, another teenager who had left for college early, taking with him all the dreams and consequences of summer that had revealed the monsters hiding behind their perfect facade. The pool that had been the scene of their passion became Tyler's tomb, its infinity edge now hiding an infinity of guilt that would connect Sarah and Jessica forever, bound not by love, but by the shared knowledge of what they had become when their perfect life was threatened. In the end, their desperate attempt to reclaim their happiness had cost them everything they were trying to protect, leaving them with nothing but each other and the terrible secret that would define the rest of their lives.